Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the PixelCast. I am Jeremy Alessi, founder of PixelFest, and tonight I am joined by David Hernly. David is a local developer at Hampton Roads. He is the creator of Starship Horizons and Mythric Mystery Master, and we're very happy to have him on the show tonight. How's it going there, David?
Oh, it's going great. How are you doing?
I am doing just fine. I'm very happy, as always, to be doing the PixelCast, and we're starting out tonight. I've got a shot of a 60-minute countdown timer with, and you can't see this because we're not screen sharing or anything right now, but it's a map of the world, and I guess this is a shot from Mythric Mystery Master. Is that correct?
Yep.
Sweet.
It sure is.
So what's going on? What's going on here actually? Because I haven't used this software. I was sort of previewing some of the screenshots that you have on your website. And a lot of it looks like setup. You can set up your devices, you can set up your schedule, you can create your stories for your escape room, right? This software is essentially all used for escape rooms.
Primarily, yes. We use it for some other types of attractions outside of that, like haunts, like the scare zones and things like that.
Right on.
But primarily, absolutely escape rooms. So what Mythric Mystery Master, or affectionately we call it M3 for short.
Yeah.
It's really about controlling the experience.
Right.
So it handles the timer like what you have there, so that if you had a monitor in the room where players could see what their time is remaining, but you could also send like video clues and image clues and text clues to them through that, so that you can communicate.
That's very cool. Yeah, this background, it's giving me a sort of 007 vibe. So I'm guessing this comes from some sort of spy-based escape room, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and you've got all sorts. I mean, any theme you can think of that would be theatrical, it's out there somewhere.
Right.
Indiana Jones, spy, space, gothic, horror, detective, all that kind of stuff is out there.
Very cool. And one thing I want to just get for the audience members, David spoke at PixelFest 2018, where he covered, I think, a great deal of his history as a developer. And David is, I'd say David's a veteran developer, been developing longer than I have, which is quite a while. And so I look up to David. He's one of those guys that came in the generation before I did. So all the stuff that they did, I thought was really cool. And I think, David, you actually know like Richard Garriott, who's the creator of Ultima and stuff like that. You've been around the industry for quite a while.
Yeah, I'll go with the veteran term. I'll take that.
So one of the cool things, though, is that Mythric Mystery Master came out of Starship Horizons, and we're going to get on to Starship Horizons a little bit later. So Starship Horizons is a bridge simulator that you sit down and you actually pretend to be part of something like a Star Trek bridge crew or something to that effect, where you've got your own monitor, your own station, your own bridge crew position. Really cool. I think that this gets a huge amount of attention over at MAGFest, where you take up a lot of space, several rooms, and you have a ton of setups, busy the whole weekend and all that stuff. And of course, you've set up at PixelFest in the past, which has been super cool, and I know people have loved it there. But Mythric Mystery Master came out of Starship Horizons. That's correct, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They both share a common architectural core. So, without getting into Horizons itself, like you said, we'll get into that in more detail later. A lot of the architecture underneath do things like control DMX lighting, or talk to Z-Wave devices, which home automation devices, or talk to a Raspberry Pi or PLC. Which is a programmable logic controller.
Nice.
Or talk to Arduino devices. I was starting to do all of that from the simulator side of things, for like stuff that for the immersion of being on a starship. Well, it turns out I had helped an escape room install Horizons as part of one of their experiences, and after everything was set up and running, they were all happy and everything, and it was running great. The gentleman, this was Live Action Escapes up in Worcester, Massachusetts. He called me, and he says, hey, I love what you're doing, but could you make a version of this that, like, you get rid of all the space stuff and you just give me all the controls for all the hardware and stuff? And I basically was like, well, why would you need that? And he's like, well, I want to use it for my other escape rooms that have nothing to do with space. And I said, well, the escape room industry is, 5-6 years old in the United States. There's got to be, software out there that can handle that. And he was like, okay, I'll tell you what, you do your research, call me back. and I did. And there's some other software that has been out there, 2 or 3 systems, but none of them really approached it from a technical and robust level that we were doing.
Right.
So I took that architectural core that did all of that hardware manipulation and interconnectivity, and then wrapped it in like some of the screenshots you've been showing, so that you have your timers and clues and hints and objectives and all of these things.
Yeah.
But to this day, as I'm working on both products, the core is a shared source tree. So as I upgrade one, I'm upgrading both at the same time.
That's awesome. Yeah, right now the screenshot that I have up, it looks like it's from an experience called Ghostly Encounter, but it's showing devices. So it's got front lights, back lights, phone, key drop, Ouija board, bookcase, laser, exit door, and I'm sort of blocking, portrait, small chest, lamp. So these are a lot of these devices are actually hardware devices when it says devices,
Yeah.
or are these virtual devices inside the experience itself?
No, most of them tie their definitions, right?
Mm-hmm.
For a physical device that's in the room.
Okay.
Most commonly, like in some of those examples are Z-Wave.
Okay.
If you're familiar with Z-Wave, which is a home automation technology, so you can turn off, say, for an escape room, turn on or off a maglock, magnetic lock. So you could have like a secret door that you trip the Z-Wave sensor, and then the door pops open, as a surprise.
Very
right?
cool. And
Or
so what you can
lights,
like
like
script
EMX.
so you can basically script the order of this when you're setting up an escape room experience.
Yes. We built a full event architecture that's all fully dynamic, that has conditional firing events, so you can actually have automation where you can say, when these 3 conditions are true, fire the following 6 actions in this order. And then you can even stage it out, so you can actually have wait commands in there, so you can play a video, and then as soon as the video ends, do a sound effect, change the lights for light, like you might have lightning strike,
Right.
or change them to be more ominous. Really about the immersion.
Yeah. So I just switched backgrounds now. What we're seeing is this is under the general tab, and we see escape to win in the upper left corner, but this looks like you're creating a new experience called the Haunted Manor. Which is
Right.
an attraction. So is this a story that you're creating, or is this an attraction that you can then insert into any story that you create? I guess I'm trying to think of what are sort of like the layers of abstraction for this thing.
So you have devices at a global level, and what I mean by that is you might have DMX. You keep hearing me say that. That's, for those that might not know, is a lighting technology that is based on classic XLR. It was created back in the 80s for actual like rock and roll stage shows.
Right. Okay.
So it's really fast, high efficiency lighting. Really, like, you can render lighting cues for 10 milliseconds, 20 milliseconds. I mean, you can do really fast stuff. But you might have lights that span the entire facility, like work lights, which is not uncommon, across 5 or 6 different escape rooms. So that's kind of this global level. And then under that, you mentioned it, is what we call stories.
Okay.
Stories in M3, it's really about you are creating an experience for players. Because a story, when you talk about an escape room, and we don't call them escape rooms, we do call them stories, because these experiences have prologues. Like, so when you go into the room, you're going to have something that starts you off on your experience. Something's going to happen, or you might hear an audio clip from a doomed bride that needs you to rescue her or solve her mystery, things like that. And then you play the experience, and as you go through it, and eventually you either win or you lose.
Right.
Typical escape rooms, you have an hour. So during that time, if you're able to solve the mystery before the hour, you win, and there might be an epilogue for your victory. But if the hour is up and you've failed to get out, there may be an epilogue relative to your failure, and you can script all of these different events dynamically.
So you dive down from that story level, then down into the event level. I guess a sequence of events comprises a story.
Right. Well, it's a combination of things. So underneath the story, you have theming, like you were showing. Theming can include like the background images and the font for the timer. Could include a music soundtrack. Could include the devices, like we've been talking about. So those are underneath the story as well.
Okay.
And of course the events. So the events are all conditional based. So events will not just trigger in some sequential order without any other circumstances. Let me give you an example. Is all the stories in M3 have a story state, and that's a natural progression. So a story state that is idle is a room that's ready for players to come into, but hasn't started yet.
Okay, I see.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then as you start the game, you may go into the prologue. So then the story state is prologue. And then once the prologue's done, you go into the story state running. So you see that there's this natural flow. And then the events kind of key on top of that. So I might have an event to play a video when the room starts, right? Mm-hmm. So when the game master hits start, the room goes from idle to prologue. And the event I've defined over here might say on story state equaling prologue, which I've just triggered as the game master, play this video on this screen. And so it will trigger based on the interaction of both of a game master or the players. So you might have an event in the room where they might pick up a phone, and that phone might have an Arduino in it that has a series of sequences, so that it knows when they dial the right number, it can tell Mythric Mystery Master they've dialed the right number. So then that can tell a device that's in that listing there to say, okay, right number dialed true. And then I can have an event that says, right number dialed equals true, then play a victory noise or complete this objective. So it's really just a natural hierarchical tree, if you will, event architecture, and it's very powerful.
This is something else, man. I don't know if I ever saw the interface for this, and I'm going to jump back real quick from the story builder to, it looks like there's a scheduler, and so it looks like this is what the studio or the escape room, whatever the experience business would use to lay this out. I mean, that's my take on it. So I see Ghostly Encounter at 1:30, at 3 p.m., at 4 p.m. or 4:30 p.m. Then I see Lunar Lockdown, which is running at different times. It looks like in a different room. The Explorers Club, the Protocol. So you've got, this. It looks like this belongs to a business that's got 4 experiences that can be running at almost any given time, and I guess that lets them lay out their schedule for the day. And control these things. So what we do is, that's the calendar screen you're looking at. Now that's an integration. So what we do is, we don't actually control their schedule. Okay.
But we integrate with their, all escape rooms use some form of a booking system.
Okay.
And a few of them are one's called Bookio, another's called Fair Harbor, and these are full-fledged booking engagement systems. So people can go log in, and say, okay, I want the 6:30 slot, and do all that. So those are separate systems entirely, and we chose not to bite off that from a development standpoint, because there are other people out there that do it very well.
Right, that makes sense.
But what we do is tie directly into those systems so that we can pull that data and present it like what you see there, so it's really clean. Right. That's one thing I will tell you these other systems don't do well, is show you kind of this calendar view of what's my day look like.
Yeah, this is great. I mean, if you're operating this business, it's so. I mean, I've never seen this in my life, essentially, other than cropping the photo to put it into OBS today. But I looked at it and I was like, cool. Here's the schedule for the experiences we're going to be running in this escape room today, which is really neat.
Yeah, and in that example, that example, it actually updates every 5 minutes, so it's near real time.
Right.
So as people book, you'll see them kind of pop in on your schedule as you go.
So the number of players there, those are the number of people that have actually booked that experience?
Yep, so that cool as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's see, let me jump back. So we got the device manager. All right, so that's I definitely pulled a couple of shots in here, and I haven't used this yet, and I would love to actually run through it at some point. I don't know how easy as that would be to do, but how many escape rooms now are using this software?
I work with over 100 facilities, not only nationwide but around the world.
Wow, that is awesome. Now, I've noticed you've been you do some travel. So when if somebody's using this, have you been traveling overseas to go help with the integration, or have you just done that virtually?
In terms of overseas, that's been virtual.
Okay.
Typically through sharing software. or remote desktop softwares that we all know and love.
Right.
But in terms of inside the United States, I do travel a lot for my job, of course, around the United States. So when I am in various areas, I definitely contact any of the escape rooms I'm working with, even if they're not having issues. They just want to show me what they're working on, or they might want tips and tricks, like, hey, I want to do this. What's a great idea, or what's a neat way to do this?
That's
right?
Awesome. Are you thinking about something that's interesting? I mean, you've got 100 escape rooms using this already, 100 independent facilities. That's a big milestone. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. How's that been ramping up? Is it something that looks like it's accelerating? Is it a fairly linear, kind of ramp up, or?
I would say accelerated, particularly in the last 8 months.
Okay.
And it's the nature of any new software. This software was released officially 2.5 years ago now.
Right.
It seems like yesterday.
Yeah, it does. When you're talking about it at PixelFest 2018, it seems like 2 minutes ago about. Whew.
Yeah. And I will say, it gained pretty good momentum even early on. So it grew a good following even early on, because what I found, similar to what when I was working with that one escape room that said, go do your research. And this is not really about comparing the M3 to the other softwares, but they were doing very specific things in a very narrow set of capability, with a very narrow set of capabilities.
Right.
I kind of came on the scene with all this other stuff, and a lot of the screenshots you've been showing, I really focus when I try to do something that I don't see very commonly in any industry, to be blunt, which is when we were developing M3, when I took all the guts from Starship Horizons and started building on top of it this escape room experience, I actually went to Virginia Beach, and you mentioned them, they're on the screenshots there, Escape to Win, which is right off of Witch Duck. And I'm going to plug them. They have an amazing facility. For anybody that's in the Virginia Beach area, you should definitely check them out if you haven't already. But they did not have any software solutions at the time. And I got to be good friends with them, and I said, hey, I'm working on this new thing. Could I work with you on building this up and using you guys as kind of a beta site, right, to figure this out?
Yeah.
So what we did is my wife and I would go every Saturday. We would take our daughter to dance, and she usually dances all day. And we would be at the escape room running the software as game masters, running the rooms, putting the people in, taking them out, doing everything like we own the facility. And so I was, basically tasting my own medicine in terms of what I was developing. You
had to become a SME on escape room management, I guess, to develop this software in essence. It's a subject matter expert for people that don't know that at home. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. Yeah. I thought I lost you again. We were having trouble before, but.
Definitely a SME, but also as I was using my own creation, I would go, hey, this is great. That stunk. This really is awful.
Right.
And so how can I make it better? And if I'm running this room, what do I want to know? What do I want access to at my fingertips to override or make sure, if something goes wrong in the room, we all understand technology.
Oh, yes.
If a piece of technology doesn't work, well, how do you get around it? How do you help the game master with that experience?
And
so
you're kind of eating your own dog food there. That was really the biggest thing with it, I guess.
Yeah. Like I said, my metaphor is taste your own medicine.
Right. Yeah.
Your own.
Man, it's very, very cool. I'm very interested to see it. I think to see it in action, and I'll probably have to head out to Escape to Win. Do you know Xerxes Nabong?
I do. He's actually he also runs Mythric Mystery Master.
Okay, awesome. I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if I'd mentioned that. I feel like I mentioned that before, and I don't know if I had emailed you guys or.
Oh, no, he has Escape Room Virginia Beach and Escape Room Peninsula.
I remember mentioning, I feel like I mentioned him before because I wasn't sure if he was using it yet, and I can't remember if I had hooked you guys up or I just mentioned it to you or I mentioned you to him, one or the other. I can't remember, but I'm glad that he's using it now. That's very, very cool.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Yeah, I think I have a child. Hold on one second here.
Okay.
All right, David, are you still there?
I sure am.
All right, wonderful. Yeah. My son needed a potty break from sleeping, so how to take care of that. So sorry about that, folks at home. We're just going to be real here tonight. So
we've all been there.
So yeah, that's very, very cool though. I'm glad that Xerxes is using the software as well, and probably need to stop by his place at some point and check all that out. So I want to jump into at that point. I want to jump into Horizons, which I've got a screenshot up now. I don't know what. There's a gray ship. It kind of looks. I would almost describe it as like a battleship. Maybe it's a freighter. I don't know. There's a lot of in this particular shot. It's the crowd is playing. There's a lot of purple and blue. It's kind of a gray ship on a with more of a blue background. A lot of blue in the nebulas. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the Horizons itself, which is it's a carrier. It's like a battleship carrier.
Right.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Yeah, the shot, man, it looks really good. The shading and stuff that you've got going. You've got the shadows. It looks like the ship is self-shadowing and everything like that. So I noticed, over the years, and the first time that anybody, I guess, ever played this was at the Maker Faire back in 2012.
That's right.
That's October, basically.
Yeah. So I love telling this story, but I was at the 757 Labs.
Mm-hmm.
The hackerspace.
Hackerspace down, yeah.
Yeah. That Ethan ran, and I was there with Ethan and another gentleman, Leroy, and I had always wanted to do a bridge simulator, pretty much. And I started coding in the late '70s, so like Star Trek was a big thing for me.
Yep.
And I always wanted to do it, and I tried in the late '90s, but the technology just wasn't there.
Right.
Not to do this kind of distributed network behavior with the level of detail that I wanted.
Right.
So I stuck it on the shelf, and I always give them credit, but Tom Robertson that did a game called Artemis,
mm-hmm.
which is also a bridge simulator. It came out in 2012.
Right.
And I heard about it, and I said, "Oh my gosh, somebody actually did it!
Yep.
That's awesome, right? Like, hooray!" I played it immediately because again, that was something I've always wanted to do. And played it for about a half hour, had a great time. But I immediately said to myself, this is great. I want more. I got greedy.
Right.
I want more. I want more cool stuff. I want more detail. So I literally stewed on it for a couple of days. And I was at 757 Labs, sitting there. We had just kind of gone through working on a few PCB boards, doing some geeky stuff.
And was Leroy Bainham involved? Like, were you talking to Leroy Bainham about this? Because he and I had worked together as early as 2006, and I'm trying to think when he mentioned it. In 2009, we did a lot of work with Hangar 9, the flight sim place out in Virginia Beach, and so the first time that I think anybody ever brought the idea up to me, it was Leroy, and we were doing these simulators, and we had created like this pit boss center and we built a radar system and stuff like that for these old, it was an old, I forgot the name of the software that they even used. But we basically used a packet sniffer to hack into their networking protocol and then figured out how to, get data out of it and put it into this like flash-based radar. But more or less, I think obviously I'm a Star Trek fan as well, and that the first time I ever heard of the idea was through him. And I know you guys know each other, so I wasn't sure, where was this something you all had discussed previously?
No, it wasn't. It actually all culminated into that one night sitting there at 757 Labs, and I said, have you guys played this thing called Artemis? And Leroy said, yeah, and Ethan's like, well, I haven't played it, but I've heard about it. I said, well, it's a bridge sim, and I said, I think I want to do my own. And Ethan was immediately like, dude, that's a lot of work, man. It's like, you don't want to do that, man. That's a lot. There's a lot that goes into that,
Right.
And I said, I know, but I want to do it. Nobody else is going to do it, like the way I want it to be done, right? That's what a lot of programmers end up saying to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So
somebody had a great quote about that. They were like, telling a programmer that it's already been done is like telling a musician that there's a song about love or whatever. Like whatever you want to program, every programmer is going to want to do their own take on that.
Yep, that's exactly right. And so I basically told Ethan, it's like, no, I'm doing it. And Leroy's the one that brought up, well, there's this, we're doing this Maker Faire in like 8 weeks. Do you think you could put a prototype together for that? And I said, challenge accepted.
It's just the motivation you needed.
Yeah. And so I got in touch with, I think it was Bo at the time. Leroy, and got my space and stuff. And literally I had just enough time to go from the idea sitting on the couch to get kind of a really rough tactical and a really rough flight station with touchscreens set up. So it was really just, a shooting gallery, if you will, flying around in space near a planet. So there wasn't a lot of depth to it at the time.
Right.
But it was a technical, can I do what I want to do architecturally? Can I prove it to myself? And we presented it at MAGFest, and that's when you and I first met officially. I think we met probably, because I think I met you at Hangar 9, but we didn't really chat.
You and I met, and maybe it was at Hangar 9. The first time that I remember meeting, it was, I'm gonna forget his last name. A buddy of mine, Pat, had taken me down to Atlantis, and he told me that you were working on something like this. And so I think you and I might have met at Atlantis Comics for the first time, and that was
I remember that.
Yeah, that was. I'm trying to think if that was like spring or summer of 2012, and so you and I had a pretty lengthy conversation. I think a lot of it hinged on the networking involved. For example, we had, if I remember correctly, had a pretty lengthy conversation on, well, if you fire a projectile over the network, how would you accomplish that? Of course, I was coming at it thinking like, I'm going to do this whole thing in Unity, and you were coming at it more, I think you wanted to do this web client and using, what are you using, WebSockets, and you're still doing that, which you've got this really like lightweight client that can basically go on any device, which is really, really neat. And basically from that conversation, we got on to Maker Faire, and I came to Maker Faire and I showed off Airspin and Swapfire, and you showed off, and you had Horizons working, and it's like, boom, he did it. He just went and made the thing. Yeah. Which was awesome.
Yeah, and you and I were like catty-cornered to each other pretty much.
That
was the second one, I think, right?
The second one we were catty-cornered. Yeah, the first one I was kind of towards the back wall, and you were over on like the right wall, or depending on how you want to describe it. If you came in from the entrance, like where the loading zone is, you were, I think, on the left, and I was like straight back in the center of the thing. Yeah. Man, that Maker Faire changed everything. That event the night before at the Ignite event, that was that Friday night. I feel like so much came out of that weekend, like all around in terms of like creative stuff going on in Hampton Roads. It's pretty incredible how one event could change so much. Yeah.
That's awesome.
It was.
But yeah, and you were talking about it, but I'm very happy with where we've gotten to from a network topology standpoint with the Horizons architecture.
Right.
Because we did stick to that for consoles, your interfaces where people actually use now. That could be a touch screen, a tablet, a phone, a laptop, a Raspberry Pi. Anything that can run a browser can run one of these Horizons consoles.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is all done through a custom WebSocket layer that we wrote with a custom web layer. So we have our own custom server logic for both the HTML and as well as WebSockets. So that's that topology for that. But then going from bridge to bridge, you meaning from one quote unquote server to another server. So your peer to peer, if you will. That's more classic, video game network code.
Right. Okay.
More traditional in that regard.
Are you using UDP, TCP, that type of thing? At that point?
UDP. Right now, we our core that we've had for a long time is the Lidgren library, which has been around forever. We actually are getting ready to tie into. I'm going to be including a couple different options, so you actually can switch your network method. I'm going to be supporting Steam's backend as well.
Yes.
For matchmaking, and they handle a lot of stuff very nicely. And then we're looking. I'm not sure if we're going to commit to it, but I'm also looking at Photon.
Photon
is some of the things they do.
Photon is pretty fantastic. So I lean on Photon a lot with Stream SDK and with most of the network stuff that I write. I like Photon. There's another one called TNet, which is a good library for Unity that's it's decent. Unity itself has gone through I think at this point 3 different networking libraries. I don't even know where they're at right now. I essentially have been leaning on Photon for the longest time. They've got a self-hosted server that you can run where you can basically take off all the limitations. If you use Photon Cloud, you're limited to the number of messages per second you can send. There's bandwidth restrictions. Yeah, all sorts of stuff. You take the self-hosted server, just run it off of a PC box, and you just take all the caps off, and I mean, you can do amazing things with that. So
Yeah.
yeah, Photon's sweet.
So yeah, and I'm pretty impressed with Photon as well. That's why we're even looking at it.
Yeah.
But I wrote a whole abstraction layer to my network system so that I can plug in different network architectures behind it without having to rewrite the core.
Yes. Great minds think alike. I have something called the transporter. Mainly I use this for Stream SDK. Same idea. You use that transporter layer, and then you just choose your net tech in the background, and then there's a wrapper for every net tech, so that it doesn't matter what you're doing in the background. I mean, at a core level, all of those networking technologies are doing very similar things. They're connecting, they're disconnecting, they're sending data, they're whatever. So they all do it a little bit differently, but by and large, you can wrap that into one architecture. So good on you though. It's very smart. It's now. Does anybody have? I know that you said there's somebody that has basically a bridge set up that's a permanent bridge that's super like cinematic essentially. Is that person local?
Yeah. Well, there's actually 3 people that have done it.
Oh wow.
But the one that you're referring to, a gentleman by the name of Tim Prickett, he's over in Newport News.
Okay.
And I, funny enough, before coming on here, I was actually at his house because he was actually working on the bridge, and I went over there to help him with something real quick. But
Very
he
cool.
he built a full size work shed, and calling it a shed is really disingenuous. It's a very large building, but it's his workshop, and it has an upper layer that he had originally just had for storage, but then he saw me working on this, and he's like, I know what I can do with that space. And he literally built it out as a bridge. And there should be some pics. They're not on our website, but on the Facebook page for that. And he's really done an impressive work. Like he's actually constructed the DMX lighting into the walls. He actually has grating along the edges for ventilation, but it looks very sci-fi. He's got a captain's chair that's elevated. He's done some, and he's got a pocket door that actually slides open and close when you board the bridge when you head upstairs.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
I've got to see that someday, man. I've got to check that out. It's funny. I watched a little bit of Picard, and I don't know if you've gotten to catch it, and I don't know if anybody else that's gonna be watching this has watched it yet. So I don't want to give away any spoilers, but obviously, I can't help but watch that and then go back and try to compare it to The Next Generation, which is, I watched the original Star Trek as well, but then for some reason The Next Generation just sticks in my mind, so strongly, and it's just such a great work of art. That's the only way that I can describe it. So, I mean, the whole idea of setting up a bridge like this, with the sliding door and the chair and, setting up your bridge, I mean, so many people have wanted to do this, and you've made that a reality for them. And I think in a way, because your architecture hooks into the lights and hooks into the sounds, and you can really customize it and make it your own. That's something very special that I don't think anybody else has really done. So other people might have covered the gameplay from one aspect or another. I mean, you've got Artemis. Somebody did one on iOS. I even forgot the name of it at this point. Obviously, you have the Star Trek Bridge Crew game that people have played in VR, but I don't think any of those are Horizons, which actually, like your friend has done, allows you to build out your own bridge where you can sit, you can feel the leather, you can smell it, touch it, taste it, sit in it with your friends. Build your own bridge. That's just it's on a whole other level, really.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned Star Trek Bridge Crew, which I enjoyed quite a bit, by the way.
Right.
It's interesting talking about this and talking about it in regards to also coexisting, if you will, in the same space as Artemis and Bridge Crew.
Mm-hmm.
But they're all different experiences.
Yep.
Right. There's not I have never subscribed to, whether I'm the creator of it or not, that one particular approach. Even if I love a game dearly, that doesn't mean the others are invalid or have no worthwhile.
Yeah.
Artemis is a great pick up and play action kind of party game that I'll still pick up and play it from time to time. Bridge Crew is beautiful, has all the different theming. So like you said, you can play Next Generation, you can play Classic, you can play the film universe, those kinds of things. Where we fall and you kind of mentioned, is I want the tactile experience as much as possible.
Right.
We actually will, on the Steam platform, we will be supporting Steam VR, but not for the way you think.
Okay.
We're not going to be supporting it for a bridge member, so like flight, tactical sciences, communications, engineering, or the captain, like Bridge Crew does. Like you basically put on your view, and then you have kind of the virtual console in front of you.
Yeah, you work with using the controllers, and it's like you can reach out and grab the controls and stuff like that. Your hands are in the space then because of that.
Yeah, but as a result, and this is just my opinion, where that falls short is your interfaces have to be very simplistic because you're now hunting and pecking with virtual hands.
Right.
So so you have to simplify the gameplay, which we didn't want to do. We want, as much as we can, more robust gameplay. So we stayed away from VR for the bridge experience, but where we are including VR is our architecture. Yes, it's primarily a bridge game where you have a group of 5-6 players, but it supports. There are missions in the game where you play as a fighter, a single-person fighter craft. So you can have a joystick and throttle and even rudder pedals if you want,
right, to
fly that ship around space, just like Elite Dangerous. Now, I think we do a really great job with the graphics. I don't pretend to be as good as Elite Dangerous,
right?
But same vein, right, where you can just fly around like a space jockey. But we are going to support VR for that experience, right? Because it's a single player experience, at least relative to the craft. So being able to look around your cockpit, just like the others support, we are planning to do that, but not for the bridge. And that's an intentional decision because you've seen it at PixelFest and when we were at MAGFest.
Yep.
It's so awesome to be sitting next to your buddy playing, and then like they do something stupid, and you look at him and go, "What are you doing, man?" It's great fun. Now that being said, it's
been great at breweries as well. You can drink a beer while you play it, and there's this sort of wait experience, where you're kind of hanging out waiting for your turn, like to do your task. I don't know. There's good pacing for a party.
Oh yeah. Well, and actually, it's interesting you bring that up because as a game designer and a game developer, that is the biggest challenge: is the balance.
Yep.
Right. How do you balance a six-player experience where everybody's position is different?
Yeah.
And that challenge will continue. That doesn't go away.
So it's one of my favorites because I preach this almost every episode here on the PixelCast, but I just love the idea of the old couch multiplayer, sitting with your buddies, playing the game, and of course I think Horizons is built in that vein, like you're supposed to be right next to your friends, ribbing them, whatever, as you're playing it. So it's a very social experience, while at the same time being incredibly immersive on the virtual side as well. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's super cool, man. I think I have a shot of the fighter here. I've got a couple of shots. There's one here. There's a ship that I'd almost describe it as something. It looks like a space shuttle, but it could be a freighter or something like that. And, again, the graphics have really greatly improved over the years as I've sort of been watching this thing. It looks like this thing's fully bump mapped and, you've got, self-illuminated lighting on the ship and all sorts of cool special effects. Then I think I've got a shot here of the launch sequence. That's where you come out of the gate when you're launching. And then I think I've got a shot external. It's an external shot here. It looks like of an individual fighter. You've got, so almost like a plasma trail coming out the back there. And the lighting on this shot's pretty low, but it just looks like it's an individual starfighter that's been launched out of the main ship.
Yeah. So we do have all of your classic, if you will, 3D rendering things built in, like you said, normal mapping, self-illumination, specular lighting, specular maps. All of those classic things are built into there. And we actually, and I freely admit, I'm not sure which pictures you're showing, but on the Steam page, we actually put a whole new crop of photos with the new renderer. Right. I don't know if that's where you pulled them from.
I pulled these right off your website. Yeah.
So actually, and this is just like recently. So these are brand new. We actually have improved the renderer even better than what you're showing.
Okay. Awesome.
So it's even improved from that. So we've done some great stuff with that.
Yeah.
And all the models have been upgraded too.
Yeah.
So we went to town.
Yeah. It's always improving, which is very cool. Now, how how has the Steam? Has it launched on Steam? I think a couple of months ago you were talking about launching on Steam, and I was under the assumption that you'd already done the launch. So is it out in the wild on Steam?
So it's listed on Steam. You can wish list it right now.
Okay.
So we set a couple of internal goals. I'm actually reworking, and we just talked about the networking code.
Mm-hmm.
I'm reworking a couple of things to do more of a lobby style behavior.
Okay.
So you can find groups to play with over the internet if you want to.
Right.
And that could be bridge versus bridge. I don't even mean playing a single bridge, but where two groups of couch friends can get together and either play together or against each other in the same missions, that kind of thing. But our launch date right now is March 16th.
Okay.
So and that's actually set in Steam. So we're trying to finish all of that in the next 5.5 weeks.
Well, you had that initial 8-week deadline, so here you go. You've got a deadline, March 16th. Starship Horizons will be available on Steam. And how's the wish list going? You got a lot of people that have hooked up for that?
I'm pretty excited. Last I checked, our numbers were over 1,000.
That is awesome. Fantastic.
Well, and as you and I both know, we'll see how that number really pans out in terms of purchases.
Right.
But hey, it's a great number to have as a wish list.
Yeah, that's great.
So yeah, really excited about that. We are going to be supporting, by the way, and we already do support when it goes out on Steam. Steam Play Together, Steam Link. So you actually can invite a friend to play and share, even if they don't have a copy. You can do this. This is basically the built-in Steam streaming.
Right. Yes. That's where you can play a split-screen game remotely, essentially.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we'll be supporting that. We already support Steam Achievements, Steam Cloud. So if you install Horizons on your laptop and on your desktop, and you have a saved game on one, it'll transfer to the other. So we're supporting all of that, which is pretty cool. And then eventually we're going to try to support the entire Steam infrastructure, including Steam Workshop. Right. So when it goes live on the March 16th, Steam Workshop will not yet be turned on.
Okay.
But that will be implemented hopefully during the summer. So it's just that you know how to, again, as a developer, you gotta have to make your priorities. So keep your eye on the ball.
I know all too well. You gotta pick your battles.
Yep. So we'll be supporting Steam Workshop, which means through Steam, people will be able to add custom ships, custom missions, custom universes.
Oh man.
Custom screens, and that's something we haven't talked about here. But the way Horizons is architected, not in terms of how the code is written, but how the universe and the experience is constructed, is all through XML.
Okay.
So how what defines a ship and what components are on that ship and what a component is made of, what comprises a weapon, what comprises a planet or a star system or an entire galaxy, a mission, like our quest, if you will, and what that comprises. All of those are XML defined. So that whether it's Steam Workshop or just on their own, people can create mods and additional missions and other things for the universe. And then the entire architecture above that is modularized so that Horizons itself, like the core experience that ships with the game, is essentially a module. So when we release, say, other dynamic content, we'll be doing some DLC. We're not going to be doing microtransactions. We're going to go more the traditional route.
Sure.
Where the DLC will have like a whole package of stuff that comes with it.
Right.
Right. Like a whole series of a new storyline or new missions.
Makes total sense. You're just giving total new content. I mean, expansion pack essentially.
Yeah. Instead of just buying like an individual ship or something, we're going to go more traditional.
Okay.
But with that in mind, people can create their own modules that either enhance the core Horizons experience, or they can do a TC, a total conversion.
Nice.
Where they create their own module that is a master module that's basically owning the universe, and they can customize everything. Put in their own ships, their own sounds. Even the dialogue system is XML based.
I can hear the licensing dollars just rolling in, man. The change is just...
From your mouth to God's ears.
Yeah, there we go. I'll pray for you, man. I hope it happens. I'm so excited about the progress that you've had with this one. I mean, I think with both of these pieces of software that you have, I know in recent years it seems like, M3 has been taken off for you as a business, and that, but you've continued to work on Horizons, and I don't know commercially where that is exactly, but I can see a point in the future at which Horizons is, might be who knows which one will be the bigger business, but I can see both of them really, really thriving. So, definitely congratulations, man, and keep up the good work. From my perspective, the thing that we're trying to get across with PixelFest is this idea of growing through love of games, that, if you pursue game development, you're going to build this wonderful skill set. You're going to be creative. You're going to, you're going to come up with all these, solutions that other people may not normally think about. And that's going to help you, whether you're building a game like something like Horizons, or whether you walk into an escape room and, you've got to come up with a solution for it. You took your game code, you went into this other business that's not a video game, at least traditionally, and you're able to say, oh yeah, I can engineer all this stuff, you know what I mean? And of course you also have a healthcare business, so you do, utilitarian software in addition to all this stuff, but I think people can tell from your energy, just from the way that you're speaking here tonight, you're super excited, you're pumped up, you love what you do, and that is, you're creating value in multi-dimensional space there with your video game development skill set, essentially. And I can't remember, did you get started with games first? I think you said this in your PixelFest talk, and anybody watching this should go back and look at the PixelFest 2018 talks that we had. But were you kind of like game dev first, or what was the first software? Like, what was your entry point?
So, I would say dabbling in game development.
Right.
I was one of those, closet developers, if you will, through the 70s and 80s.
Right.
My first software that I would call genuinely released is going to be more on the professional side, on the home care side, like you mentioned.
Right.
Game-wise, I've always been developing ideas, and we could go on and on about. I wrote a piece of software in the late 90s called iHome.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And now this is before a particular brand came out called iHome, which is, speakers and accessories and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
I created something called Interactive Home, iHome, that I wrote so that you could actually speak to your home. Sound familiar?
Yes, it does.
from different rooms, and each room could have a personality. So, the living room could be the master control program from Tron, and you could have the computer HAL in another room, and it used I had built basically an entire interpreter on top of Microsoft SAPI, so that you could then talk to X10 controls, which was old home automation for those of us that remember that from 30 years ago.
Right.
So I did all that, but then my first game was called Chivalry: Conquest of the Known World, and it was a browser-based, massive multiplayer war game. Which you see those all over the place now on phones. Mm-hmm. Like, that ecosystem has moved to the phone, right? But back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I had about, at its peak, almost 5,000 players worldwide for that. And that was really my first game that was released as a product. And since then, things like I basically took a hiatus after that, worked on Horizons starting in 2012, and here we are.
Right. But before you previously, when you were younger, you essentially dabbled in making games, not necessarily releasing any sort of commercial product, but you were
from day one.
Okay,
absolutely.
So day one, programming games, and that's just kind of the point. I think we went back and we talked about that Maker Faire, and we talked about the Ignite, and one of the things that happened for me, Maker Faire was great, getting to show off Airspin, Swapfire at that first Maker Faire, and getting to see all the other creative endeavors people were engaging in here in Hampton Roads was really exciting. And the night before that, there was that Ignite talk where you had to get up and you had to speak for, I think it was 5 minutes, and you had like 15 seconds, 20 slides, 15 seconds each, something like that. It was some format where the slides were on auto forward and you had to speak to them. And Rich Moorman is the guy who organized that, and essentially I remember pestering Rich to let me speak. And he was like, listen, man, I've been planning this thing for 6 months. I can't just throw somebody in. You're going to have to come back next time. And then like a couple of hours, I think it was like 4 hours before the event, he's like, hey, somebody got sick. Can you fill in? So opportunity was knocking. And I was like, wow, 4 hours to prepare for this, this specialized speaking event. And I'm going around getting all the equipment for Maker Faire anyway. I'm getting all the stuff for my booth and tablecloths and signs and everything like that. And I was like, you know what? Sure, I'll do it. So I remember making like the simplest PowerPoint, like black on white PowerPoint presentation, while I'm waiting at the register at different shops or waiting at red lights or whatever. And I sent it to Rich, and he's like, "All right, yeah, elegant, black on white, cool." So I do this. But I ended up doing this talk, and by doing, my talk was how to top the App Store for $1,000. But by doing that talk, that's where I met Zach Miller, and I met Tom Flake, and a bunch of other folks that were on the startup side. So there's another really cool thing about that event was that, Maker Faire, we had a lot of the, more of like the technical talent involved in that, and there were plenty of those folks that were at Ignite that night because they were the ones who were, setting up the projectors and the mics and doing all that stuff. And then there were plenty of people from sort of the entrepreneurial side of the community that were there as well. And if it wasn't for that night, well, probably I wouldn't have ever created Stream SDK. Never would have met Tom. Never would have founded Because, so the Bitcoin facility that got started here, which I think has had the kibosh put on it at this point, but that never would have gotten started. There's so many things that came out of like this one weekend, so it's incredible. And of course, gave you the deadline, that 8-week deadline to get Horizons going, and so. Just I think having those technical folks though to because I think all of these events came out of that hackerspace, so there's a bunch of people who were however you want to describe them, but people that had, I think, technical skills and creativity got together and they spawned off this weekend. That weekend spawned off all sorts of other stuff, and it's very important for us to all first of all geek out, experiment, tinker, make stuff, obviously get together, network. You don't know what's going to happen. And of course, like, just keep growing. And I say through love of games. My whole take on that night and then going forward years into the future, looking at all the other events, was we need more video game developers in this area. If we had that, who knows where we would go. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually want to go back to something you were kind of just talking about just a minute ago, and talking about asking me like how long I've always been dabbling with video games. But as a developer, one of the things I always love to kind of impart, if you will, lesson learned, is I will still use tips and tricks, as a developer that I learned and figured out on an Apple IIe.
Yes.
There are still development lessons. It's not just what's the new hottest coding standard, but just coding techniques. Everything you learn along the way stays with you.
Right.
Regardless of the platform that you happen to be on. And that's the beauty of it. You can kind of build you can build your artist palette as a developer over time, and be able to keep going back to that palette as you grow as a developer, which I love that in this particular profession.
You're like 100% right, because the technology, it builds on top of itself, but you never really get rid of those underlying layers. They're always still there, and you can always like you said, that your palette just keeps expanding, as the technology comes on board, and you're just essentially adding colors, if you will. I love that analogy. That's wonderful. So, let's see, man. So we're running up here on an hour. We're at what are we at? 56 minutes. So, is there anything else that you're thinking about these days? What was I going to say? We talked about the Steam launch. Obviously, talked about Horizons, Maker Faire. We covered M3, which, man, it's so awesome. That's in 100 locations around the world. I'm like kind of flabbergasted by that, actually. I think that's awesome. Oh, I was thinking, with 100 locations, have you thought about putting some sort of conference together for those location owners? I don't know if that's something they'd be interested in, but when you have that many people using a software and it's that detailed, it strikes me that, some sort of conference where you're sharing tips and tricks and how to make stuff and serve your customers and all this stuff. I mean, at some point, it seems like that would be something that you'd be doing. Well,
I'm pretty lucky, and you're not wrong, but I'm pretty lucky in that this industry, the escape room industry, has its own conference.
Okay, there you go.
So, and actually, it's coming up in March. It's the one that's the most common right now. There's a couple, but the Trans World Haunted Attractions and Escape Room Show. So it's literally in March, but it's a combination of both escape room vendors like myself,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have vendors that might make props or make walls that people can buy to, like that might be faux brick or, props, if you will, things like that.
Right.
But then a whole mess of haunt-related material. So those people that run haunts in October, they do their shopping in March at this show, and it's in St. Louis every year.
Okay.
But what I do, to your point, what I do is I now have an annual dinner that we do at Transworld that I bring, and we have a lot of attendees that are my customers. So we get everybody together and do a nice big dinner, rent out, a local restaurant.
Right.
And get together and talk shop.
Yeah, so that's awesome, man. I'm so glad that you're doing that. If for some reason earlier in the conversation I was like, this would be a really cool thing to get all your, your users essentially together. They're all business owners. So I bet that dinner is something else, man. I bet that's a great event. I'll have to check up on your Facebook page. I don't know if you shared anything about that, but that's something I'd be interested to talk to you more about maybe a little bit later. That is very, very cool. Man, so awesome. So, and again, David Hernly, local developer, I think born and raised in Hampton Roads. You're like Hampton Roads native, right?
Close. I'm a second son, so to speak. I grew up. My earlier years were in Richmond, but my parents grew up in Hampton Roads. They both were born and grew up here. I spent a lot of time here because all of my relatives lived in this area. So even though I lived in Richmond for my younger days, we were always here.
Right.
So, and then I moved to Hampton Roads myself in '94. So I've been here more than half my life.
Quite some time.
Yeah.
So the point that I want to make with that is that, and like you said, when you said you wanted to do Starship Horizons, and Ethan, he almost sounded like he was dissuading you from doing it. Like, oh, what are you crazy, man? That's like this big project. And of course, David is, there's an ambition there, but we all should be ambitious, right? We should think big like that. And that those big thoughts, you can see in the products that you've made that, not only are you thinking, big just like conceptually, but it actually transcends into the way you design your architecture, right? So that everything you design is flexible and you're thinking as big as possible, even when you're writing your code, So it's, and I want to pass that on to anybody that's listening, that this is how we should be thinking, and anybody that's here could be building something that serves the world. Like David has built, these two pieces of software that we talked to tonight. They are things that are built here in Hampton Roads that then serve the world, and you've got like 100 independent businesses that are using one of those pieces of software, and you've got another one that, there's 1,000 Steam users right now throughout the world that have already wish listed it, and I'm sure once they actually start using, get their hands on it, this thing really starts to spread, beyond. I think, it's primarily been on the sort of like the convention circuit and locally, is my guess. I don't really know. But I'm imagining that Steam is going to take this to a whole other level where you literally are, and with both these are serving the world, because you even said that with your escape rooms, you've got people that are international. So this is the way to think, this is the way to engineer. You can tell David's a very technical guy, of course, but the point that I was always making when I got involved in the startup community side of the things here in Hampton Roads, that, hey, we need more people that are super techie like the way David is. So, thank you so much for David for being a model, I think, and showing people how to do this. And this is growing through love of games. I love it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on, man. It's been great.
Absolutely. So, any final thoughts for the evening?
No, just I agree with you. Let's keep through PixelFest and everything you're doing here. I love that. I appreciate everything you've done for the local community, trying to do exactly what you said, but just kind of grow the developer pool here, because we've got this is a great area.
Yes.
And there are a lot of great people here, and I said it in my talk that I did at the last PixelFest, but I feel like there's plenty of people that are capable developers that don't feel necessarily. It's not even about confidence. I hate associating it with confidence. It's more about they just see that writing something that they really want to do, that they have a great idea in their mind's eye, and they end up not executing it because they're like, oh, it's just too much.
Right.
Mm-hmm. It's too much. All developers kind of suffer that, but the secret to developing, in my opinion, is you bite off one little piece at a time, and before you know it, like building with Legos, you start with a couple of Legos, you end up with So I try to help encourage people that have a great idea. It's like, don't sit on it, don't feel like it's too hard to do.
Yeah.
Right?
No, you're right. Bite it. Take one bite at a time, and do that over the long haul. And before you know it, you've got something. You've got something legitimate. You've got something real. It's a business. It's a passion at the same time. Um, you know, what could be better?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it love what you do, right? And the beauty about development is that regardless of what platform it is or what language you write in, or whether if you're doing it for consoles, for PCs, or phones, it's a creative art in and of itself, and that creative energy can do some amazing things.
Definitely. All right. Well, thank you again so much, David. I really appreciate you being on the show tonight. And, of course, we're looking forward to another PixelFest Devs meetup, which I think is going to be on February 18th. That'll be the third Tuesday of February. It's not going to be at David's house, but something very cool as a side note is that David does have an arcade in his garage, and we are going to have a PixelFest Devs meetup there sometime. We're putting those plans together, so when that happens, it'll be a good time to maybe get to peek behind the curtain a little bit, see how David works the magic that he works, and so that's something to look forward to in the future. And other than that, I just want to say let's all continue growing through love of games. Thank you again so much, and